answering the question, how Minnesota winters can help with growth. Yes, we are going to tackle that question and that topic. I'm saying it that way because I have heard so many people complain about Minnesota winters over a long time. I am born and raised in Minnesota, and I kind of get the side eye every time I tell people that. I'm a native. Parents migrated from the South and settled on Minnesota. And one of the reasons why my dad said he chose to come to Minnesota as a young adult was because he had never experienced all four seasons. I usually ask everyone I meet who's not from Minnesota, why Minnesota? Why did you choose to come here? I'm always curious, um, partly because I hear a lot of natives complain about the cold and the snow. I used to be one of those people who chronically complained about Minnesota winters. There was no one in the world in my 20s that would could tell me that I was not going to be leaving Minnesota and living somewhere warm. That was not up for discussion. I remember kicking and screaming every time November, December would come. I remember January would come around the new year, and I literally would have an emotional breakdown. I would even feel like crying because I felt like I just couldn't take it anymore. I just knew I was going to move down south and have such a grand life. Like my life was going to be so much better when I moved somewhere else. That was what I always thought about. That's what I fantasized about. I thought about all the stories my dad would tell about growing up in the South. And I really wanted to have that. I wanted to make that be a part of my life. And so I tried it. I moved to the South and I didn't stay long. And it actually had nothing to do with the weather at the time. It had everything to do with not being able to find employment at the time outside of Minnesota. It was right around the time where our country was attacked on 9/11. And so when I traveled, that was something that was, you know, going on in a big way, but it also made for a little bit more security in some different states in terms of working for different agencies and organizations. And at the time, I was looking for mostly work in government, that kind of deal. So I had a hard time finding employment, and I found myself coming back to Minnesota because I had plenty of job opportunities and offers that were waiting on me. And so I had to think about it for myself. How would I make this work for me? If I came back to Minnesota, I could get a job and make enough money and travel wherever I wanted to go. And that would be a part of my own ability to grow in my mindset to think that I could, just kind of make a different plan and do something different. So I didn't have to go out in the world and move somewhere else for my life to be better. And so I say all of that to come back to it was shortly after I arrived back in Minnesota and found work here right in the dead of winter at this time. I made it back right around the holidays, after Thanksgiving and right before Christmas time, right in the dead of cold in Minnesota. In that moment, I realized how much opportunity I had. I realized that my family and the people that I loved were right here and that I actually weren't appreciating them. I was not appreciating all the different treasures that I had right here around me in this state and in the cold. It was also around that time where I remember reading an article in Essence magazine, and it talked about the different elements of the seasons. And I remember saving the winter element last because in my mind, I was thinking when I would read that section that someone would have to say something so magnificent for me to really believe that there was something positive about being in Minnesota during Minnesota winters. So I read all the other ones, and they had a feel good factor to them, and I was able to look at the different, the different qualities of summer and why I love summer. I always have been attracted to the sun. I love the sun. I love the ocean, like all those kind of different things. And so that was very fitting. I read about the fall season and how we plant our different seeds and it's harvest time and those kind of things. And I thought about and read about the spring and how in the spring those seeds that were harvested back in the fall, they're blooming and they're going to turn into very beautiful vegetation and plants and flowers and all those different things that we get to enjoy, in the spring. And so now I come back and kind of a little bit dreading to read about the winter. And in that part of the article, it talked a lot about how when we plant our seeds in the fall and when we are harvesting, there is a really big job for the earth during winter. That winter is what then freezes the land. It allows the harvesting to take place. It allows all the seeds and everything that's going to happen underneath the soil to germinate and all those different things. And it brings it together. It's protective. It's cold, so it keeps away some of the insects and all those different things. And then it applied that to our lives as well. And that's when that article and those educational pieces in that article really got me. I was like, I've never heard of that applied to one's life before. So it made me begin to think about how can I take this information and use it to survive our Minnesota winters. 20 years ago, again, I was having tantrums and fits and emotional, ups and downs in the wintertime. Today, I am so cool, calm, and collected during our winter months that it's unbelievable. And only my friends and family who had to hear all those treacherous stories about how I'm leaving will be my witnesses to talk about how drastic of a change I've made. And what I've learned is that during those Minnesota winters, we have a nice chunk of time to think about what we want to use from our season of harvesting and planting, how we want to map that out, what we want to do with that by the time our spring and our blooming time comes, that we have a moment of pause, that we have a moment of being able to enjoy that we know that we're growing, but we don't actually have to do a lot because everything around us and all the setup that we've done is taking care of itself. We can kind of sit back and we can truly, really fantasize and actualize what our blooming period will look like, how the beauty will take place, what the growth will look like, how we can change that if we don't like it. But it's during the winter times in Minnesota that we have a period of pause, that we may not be as busy as we typically are. Like if we compare that to summer months where it's nice, people are out and about. Not saying people don't move around in Minnesota during the winter. We do. I often tell friends in other states that Minnesota is one of those areas that if winter and the snow is our natural disaster, I'll take it. Meaning we're still able to move around during that time. We're not in the house. We're not iced, iced out of all the other activities. We can actually still get in our vehicles. We can move around. We can take walks. Now, sometimes we have those really frigid cold days. But again, we have learned how to grow in that anyways, right? We get our nice coats, we get our boots, we get our accessories, we put them on and we cover up, and we are still able to move about. And so I say that if we use that to think about in a symbolic way, we're not stuck. We're just slowed down a little bit. We're bundled up a little bit more. We're more in a protective stance. So if we think about Minnesota winters as a protective stance, it helps us to really think about what do we want to do in this moment of being still. And I'm calling still like the kind of a symbolic way of talking about like being frozen. Like our Minnesota lakes, they all become frozen, right? The water is still flowing underneath. The water's still there. Once the lake and the ice on top unthaws, we're able to enjoy the water again. So think about what it is that you can plant, coming around to the fall season again, and in our Minnesota winters, how we can use that time to really be protective of what it is that we want to grow, and then move towards the spring months as we are approaching right now, and watching all of that growth bloom and live it out loud, so that once we move into our summers, we can truly enjoy all the fruits of our labor. But remember, winter has a purpose, it has an element. I'm not trying to convince anyone to love winter. I'm not convincing anyone to stay in Minnesota. But what I'm doing is trying to help us all understand that it's better if we can find use and purpose in the Minnesota winters rather than use the energy that we do to complain about how horrible it is or how it's slowing us down. It's supposed to slow us down a little bit, because in that slowdown, can we really think about and really grasp the things that we're supposed to be doing, and how we can continually grow, how we can reflect on those things, how we can journal a little bit more, get moving in our bodies, get moving in our minds, and use all of that to get ready for the fall and truly bloom into the people that we always, always are, but where we can show that, come out of our layers, and then enjoy it. Thank you.